Explore the history, relationships, expertise, and data that go into ensuring Stine growers get maximum yield potential. This is the Stine Seedcast. Here's your host, David Thompson.
Hello, and welcome to the Stine Seedcast. I'm David Thompson, National Marketing and Sales Director for Stine Seed Company. Today, our guest on the Seedcast is Stine Director of Agronomy, Tom Larson. Welcome back, Tom.
Great to be here.
So as our Director of Agronomy, Tom has a unique perspective across all areas that Stine Seed Company covers. Tom's here today to share some highlights from the current growing season, how Stine's soybean and corn products are performing, and lessons that have been learned from the 2024 season. So let's get to it. Well, so Tom, you've been with us on the Seedcast before, but just for a quick review, give us a recap about your background and what you do for Stine.
Yeah, thanks, David. My background is a degree from Iowa State. Got to get my shameless plug in for Iowa State, and I have shared time in my career both on the research side and on the sales side, both with the biggest of the international companies and then the smallest regional companies as well.
So now, as the Director of Agronomy, you have a nice perspective to get to see kind of what's happening across the entire trade area that we work with. So one of the things I kind of wanted to have you on to talk about is, as we're in harvest now, what do you see as some of the major headlines that have been produced coming out of this 2024 growing season?
What a great question. And it's an interesting question to answer. So to answer the question, we have to look back. So if we look back to last year, one of the overlying weather issues was drought. Most of the area was experiencing a moderate to severe drought, especially from the west as you came across east, catching the western corn belt coming across in Iowa, even into Indiana, Illinois. We're experiencing some levels of drought. And so with the mindset of coming into the 2024 growing season, it was, boy, we've got to get rain. And we have to get a lot of rain to get caught back up. And I'll give you a perspective of north central Iowa from where I come from. We grew a fantastic crop last year on a little over 10 inches of rain throughout the growing season. And for perspective, this year by the end of June, July 1st, according to my weather records, we had over 30 inches of rain. So it's certainly a tale of two different seasons on the opposite ends of the spectrum. And so a lot of the Midwest received this excess rainfall this year, which first part of it was accepted, right? We needed that rain. We really needed to recharge our soils, and then it wouldn't quit. And so it created so many challenges. And I know other areas, you look to the south, they were wet. You go to the east, and the east was dealing with the excessive moisture as well. The first area where the water shut off was the south. The south shut the water off, and then they got the oppressive heat this year. And so kind of created this horrible environment. First, we were extremely wet, then we baked it dry. Then you go to the west, and the rain slowed down. I don't think a lot of pivots turned on until maybe the second half of July as you got out west, which was just phenomenal. That normally doesn't happen. And in the course of all this, we're thinking, okay, based on all this moisture, there's some agronomic things that'll happen. We have to monitor our nitrogen levels. We have to monitor our fertility levels. Did that water take our fertility away as our nitrogen disappeared as it leached through the soil based on how much rain we've had? And so, we're looking at that, and then we get these ideas based on our experience of, okay, with the weather we've had, we're going to get this disease or that outbreak of insects. As a rule of excessive moisture, white mold comes in soybeans. It's just kind of a hand in hand. And there are pockets where there's white mold, but it's been one of the more challenging diseases for us to screen for this year because we just haven't gotten a consistent white mold field to screen. And most people would say that's great. And it is. But,
right.
But on the agronomy team, we identified some areas where they said, we consistently have white mold. And so we were setting up these trials. One trial has 39 entries of our new products in there to screen for white mold. And we're still trying to find the white mold in those fields here late in the growing season. It's incredibly frustrating. Working with a university to also screen for white mold. And again, the same story. We're gonna have these plots. We're gonna screen for all this white mold. Look at the weather. We've had lots of moisture. It really certainly would indicate that we're on the right path to have this disease, and we're just not seeing it. And so the farmer says that's great, and from the research side, you say, yeah, but I really want to see how these new products perform in these environments. So it provides a little bit of frustration. And then as you look at the weather at the tail end of the growing season, I would say that everybody is running out of moisture. However ironic that may sound, a lot of areas haven't seen substantial rain in 2 to 3 weeks, maybe even 4 weeks at the end of the growing season, where we're really trying to fill those pods out and really finish that corn off strong and maybe put on a few more pounds on test weight. And we're just not getting that moisture. So it's really been a tale of two halves of the weather this year. It's been incredible.
So as we talk about that, of course, weather being probably the biggest variable that none of us can control. As you're out looking at, whether it be the product development plots or looking at what you're seeing in customers' fields, what have you seen of the Stine products and how they've fared, like you said, dealing with the best of times and the worst of times from a weather perspective?
Yeah, so as a general rule, the Stine hybrids, one of the characteristics that's screened for, and certainly we saw it again this year, was our emergence on our products is second to none. They will get in the ground and they'll get out of the ground and get growing. And even in these waterlogged environments that we put this seed into this spring, our hybrids were able to get up and get going, and instead of just laying in that cold, wet environment. And so we actually got off to a pretty good start. And on the soybean side, you touched on it a little bit, and you talked about our product development plot system. And this is our first year of doing this with soybeans. And as a company that advances so many new varieties every year, it has given us a tremendous opportunity to take the newest of the new, the best of the best that research gives us, and put it out in everybody's backyard, so to speak, where we can take a look at the newest products that Stine has to offer and see how they perform in this environment. Now, I don't know what next spring will bring, but I would say if they can flourish in a challenging environment like we had this year, then I'm pretty confident in a normal year we'll see how they perform. But it really did give us an opportunity to evaluate under some pretty incredibly stressful situations.
And of course, the concept normal year probably varies by where you are in the world.
I'm not sure I understand what the definition of normal is anymore, but there's that old saying about planning in the dust. So that's always the ideal situation.
So moving, I guess beyond weather, let's talk about maybe some other things like, you mentioned earlier on about insect pressures or things like that. Anything you guys saw that was particularly interesting about 2024, maybe relative to, where we've been the last few years?
Sure. So one of the issues that really showed up on the radar in let's just say the heart of the Eastern Corn Belt, Indiana, a little bit on Ohio, maybe a little bit into Illinois, but I know that in Indiana, slugs was a major issue this year on the plants. The slugs can really cause havoc, and being a Midwestern guy, I don't know if I've really dealt a lot with slugs, but in that area, they've dealt with them in the past, and so slugs were really causing a lot of defoliation, a lot of damage to the leaf structure, which then slows down the development of the plant, or in severe cases can actually kill the plant. And so slugs were something new on my bingo card for 2024, but our old standard friends on the insect spectrum made an appearance. The corn rootworms are there. Ironically, they will drown if we do have excess moisture during the right end star of their development. But there seemed to be a lot of their friends that did make it through. So we did see the rootworm pressure, albeit maybe came on a little bit late. The rootworm pressure was there, and the soybean aphid pressure was sporadic. But I think in those pockets, those hot zones, hot pockets, they were there in earnest. So I was surprised to see them. I kept looking for them, and all of a sudden one day in Iowa, they were there. I don't know where they were at before, but in 1 week's time, they really came in and were well over threshold. So in the environment that we were in this year, it can be a challenge to spend extra money out of your budget to control some of these insects. But I would say in the case of like a soybean aphid, I would hope it'd be part of a management plan that you have budgeted for that outbreak. And then if you do get to threshold or above, that you're able to utilize that those funds set aside to control that pest. And if you look at how we're trying to finish out the season with lack of moisture, not controlling a pest like a soybean aphid can really, really take the bushels off the top if you allow them to come in and do the damage that they can do by taking that moisture out of the plant, opening that plant up for other secondary diseases.
And it seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, that it's all about economic threshold, and that can be a fairly quick turn. It can be, oh, that's not that big a deal, not big a deal, and then all of a sudden it's a big deal.
It requires daily monitoring. In some cases, they'll stay localized heavy pockets in a field where you'll find them in this area, but overall, you don't meet that threshold. And so that's where you really do have to spend the time to make sure that those populations don't grow. But if I remember correctly, I think they can double in a week's time. I know that they're very prolific, and so they can really, those numbers can really expand in a hurry. So being diligent and being in your fields and monitoring for soybean aphids is certainly something that, again, I just consider it part of a management plan, that when you get to that middle of July, you're out walking your fields, you're just making sure that there's no surprises, that you don't have to do a weed control pass or an insect control pass, just to start keeping an eye on things, and not just the headlands, right? Or do the my favorite, the 60 mile an hour agronomy review, where you're driving by at 60 miles an hour and you look out the window and, yeah, it looks pretty good. Yeah. No, get out there and walk your fields, and if you need an agronomist to come out and spend some time with you to help you identify, we're here for that help too. But it's critical to make sure you know what's going on out in your field.
Earlier in the summer, we had one of your team members, Danny Gerblunas, here to talked about soybean gall midge.
Sure.
Any updates on that? Because that was something new to me that really didn't have a lot of prior experience hearing about. And I guess this was an issue he was seeing in his area, which is kind of Nebraska and western Iowa.
Right. So prior to this year, soybean gall midge was more of a philosophical theory that could happen. We saw some issues in some very isolated areas, and again, you're absolutely right. You go out extreme western Iowa into Nebraska, that we were seeing something, right, and identifying this pest. And again, this little pest, once it burrows into the stalk, the chances of its survival is pretty good. It's really difficult to control the pest once it burrows into the stalk. And once it gets in that stalk and it starts migrating north and south and taking out the pith and living a good life inside that plant, the problem is the plant doesn't react positively to that.
Right.
And we were hoping that it would be a localized problem. But as we're seeing, gall midge is expanding east. And so it's been found in central part of Iowa now. It's been found as far east as Marshalltown. And so it's certainly something that we have to be cognizant about, we have to be aware of, and it's a proactive status that you have to take. If you fear you have gall midge, if you have the right environment, a guy really has to be aggressive to get ahead of the soybean gall midge. And we are looking at some, I won't say out-of-the-box ideas, but there are products on the marketplace today that are claiming various degrees of control to this pest. And so what we're doing on the agronomy side is we're identifying some of these areas, some of these hot spots that in western Iowa, and we'll be out doing some of these applications of these products and just seeing what we see to see if the control measures up to the claim. And we did a really rudimentary test this year with varieties to see if there was a variety that it really migrated towards or a variety that it wanted to stay away from. And so we're kind of still in that evaluation process. So it's falling under one of my pet projects, and my team really, really loves my pet projects because we have a lot on our plate. But if we have a localized issue like gall midge, then we're going to jump on it and just see what we can learn to help pass on to our customers as far as here's how you can be successful for control.
So, and that kind of leads to my next question, because you have a team of agronomy folks kind of all around the Corn Belt area. And I guess as you look at that, how do you take the information that you guys gather across the entire spectrum and then take that and create solutions that are going to fit the local conditions or recommendations that growers can put to use in their own operation?
Great question. So from the research standpoint, what we will do is, and you're absolutely right, we break apart our plots based on maturity. And so everywhere that they raise that maturity grouping is where we'll have our sets. But just because South Carolina has the same maturity set as Southern Missouri doesn't mean we're going to compare those two the same when we're making our recommendations, because although it's the same maturity set, you have two widely different growing conditions. So we break it apart two different ways. We'll average everything by the maturity, and then what we'll try to do is keep it we'll do a local set as well to say, okay, in my corn product development plot system, there's 5 plots within 100 miles, 150 miles of this location. So maybe we can give you the sum of the averages, and then we can dial it into, okay, now here it is in your growing conditions, in similar growing environments, soil types, et cetera, and to really give you kind of a both ways to look at it. We can look at it as it can perform in every environment, or here's how it did in your backyard. And that's why the product development plot system is so valuable, is that we can break this data down in a multiple of different ways. And we're not just sharing data, we are spending time throughout the growing season in these plots. So our customers and our dealers have the opportunity to learn as the plant grows, and they have this well-rounded confidence with our product sets and our products. So once they come to recommendations, they have the confidence to make the right recommendations for the right acre.
So in you talking about product development plots, I know we've talked about that several times on the CCast here, and the goal, I think, being, as these products get in that last stage before commercial release, giving those a place where they can be tested, if you want to call it real world environment, on operations, and people can go out and see them, see what they look like, see how they work. What else are you learning from that project?
Right. And so if you take a step back and you look at what Stine does, and you look at what I call the research department, the elite trials, it really wouldn't be to anyone's benefit to try and learn products from that massive data set, because it is the industry's largest data set. Stine does more research than any other company out there. And a lot of times we're looking at products that might be 1, 2, or 3 years down the road before it's ready to be launched commercially. And so what I'm very fortunate that research does all the hard work. Research goes out there and they evaluate tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. This year, the corn plot sets number over 1 million plots. And so they're doing the heavy lifting, and they're evaluating on everything agronomics that would cause that product to want to move forward and be in a farmer's field. But the funnel effect. I always talk about the funnel effect. You've got this wide mouth, and that's research. You do a lot of testing, and you have a lot of products that just don't make the cut. So I am at the base of the funnel, where now we're kind of tapering this down, and now we're looking at these things. We've identified the hybrids or varieties, if we're looking in terms of soybeans, of these products that we're really excited about. And so what my team gets the opportunity to do is to place them, again, in the growing areas where we're very active in selling seed. And so now it's twofold. We'll do training throughout the year and then yield at the end of the year. But I always say that if we've done our job and we've done adequate training and had everybody in there and understand these hybrids, really yield is a piece of the puzzle that's important, but you really shouldn't need it to make your decisions on hybrids. Because what we do in the training aspect is, again, over 130 data points. We share everything with the team as much as they want. Yeah. Sometimes we can be a little overwhelming with, we're really excited about the stalk diameter of this one, but that ear shank isn't quite where we want it. But at the end of the day, we just build confidence with those go forward products. And you know what? And sometimes Sometimes we find a product that we get it to that point and we go, we just don't like it. It just didn't perform to the top. Now, it's still probably a decent product, but if we're taking 1 million plots and we're taking the best of the best, not everybody gets the trophy. We're looking at those key, the best of the best products to advance to our customers. So we get kind of heated in our discussions at the end of the year that when we do our product data review with our team is you talked about, okay, so out east, I really love this hybrid. It was great. And I said, okay, take that same hybrid and move it 1,000 miles west. How did it do there? Well, there were better products that performed better. And sometimes we can regionalize a product and really keep it out in the area. But there's some of these products, I'm a big pile product guy. I just want products that work everywhere. And that's easier said than done. But finding those products that really, really ring the bell, if it's, Iowa or Colorado or, Indiana, if it's that maturity and it works everywhere, that product is fun and easy to sell.
And that's probably, a great way to describe that interaction between the elite trials and product development plots. The elite trials produce top performing products, but they're planted and managed in a very consistent way across the entire U.S. And then the product development plots are where we learn, okay, if you treat it this way or manage it this way, or your farm is like this, then how does that product respond? So it's almost the fine tuning that you need to help understand that product fully.
Right. Yeah. If you ever have a chance to walk one of our elite trials, it's fantastic, but there might be 200,000 products out there to look at or plots to look at. So be prepared to spend some time out there and to do those evaluations. So I'll let the research guys do that part of it, and we'll stay to a 15, 16 product set that we're evaluating. That's what I could handle.
That sounds fair. As we're sitting here in harvest season, I guess I always like to kind of quiz the agronomist about, right now, everybody's focused on getting the crop in. But what are those things agronomically that the grower can be looking at to learn about how to start their plan for next year? What do they need to be thinking about now while that combine's rolling?
Just tell me what the weather will be, and we can make some great recommendations. No. So I put my farmer hat on too, and active in a family farm operation, and economics right now going into next year is probably the biggest factor. And the concern I have is when a farmer is looking at a budget, and we only have so many dollars in that budget, and you have to cut something, where do you cut? And I get really nervous when we have yield goals that are at a certain level, but then we choose to maybe pull back the fertility amounts that we're going to put on those fields, and then say, but I'm not going to readjust my yield goals, but I'm going to pull back the fertility that I'm going to put on those acres. And that's kind of concerning, So you always want to give that plant every opportunity to succeed. And so looking ahead, if you did some sins this year, you're out in the mud, you have heavier soils, a lot of clay-based soils, find those areas and make sure that you're breaking up that compaction, as we're harvesting. Make sure that tillage is, and I'm not advocating one way or the other on the tillage, but if you're in an area where you maybe rutted up some fields, to make sure that you loosen that soil up, that's agronomically a big factor. And again, we can't predict the weather. I joke about it, but we can't predict the weather. And so just be prepared that as you're looking ahead to next year, and I'll look back to last spring, there were windows that we could get a lot of work done. But I think the attitude was, well, I think it's a little bit early. I'm within my crop insurance window, but we may be a little early. I may wait. And some of that attitude resulted in a 3-week idle time that they didn't get into the fields. And so, do the homework ahead of time. Have the equipment ready to go. Have your seed lined up, and be ready so when those conditions are ready and fit, that you have the ability to get that seed off to the start. If you don't start off on the best foot, you're going to be trying to play catch up the whole rest of the season. Been doing this about 35 years, and guess what? I don't think you ever catch up. But you can play catch up and keep trying to improve it. But if we could just start off in the best environment possible, it certainly gives you a roadmap for success for the growing season.
When it comes to this time of year, I guess I'm curious, agronomically speaking, does the yield monitor provide answers or questions?
How accurate is your yield monitor? So
That's a good point.
well, so the yield monitor has been probably one of the most important tools for understanding how your farms are producing. And it kind of comes to this age-old question of, okay, I'm looking at my yield map, and I had one hybrid, I had one variety out there, and doggone it, it's not constantly dark green if that indicates the highest yield. And so we know, okay, so let's overlap some soil maps on this, and now all of a sudden we can say, oh yeah, where my yields fell off, that soil wasn't as good. So, do I try to bring the fertility level up on the poorer soils, or do I just pour the coals to the best soil, because I know the poorer soils max out in performance a lot lower than my better producing soils? And I typically say, well, if everything else is equal, if you've got adequate drainage, and again, if you get 30 inches of rain in a growing season or the first half of a growing season, I don't think adequate drainage, I don't think anybody could put enough tile in the ground for that. But I'm of the attitude, you push the good soils, and the poorer soils, you just do more of a maintenance, right? So understanding your fields, looking at those yield maps, and saying, okay, I pulled this yield off of this farm. What do I need for replacement? And do I just put replacement, or do I have yield goals that are going to be a little bit higher? Somebody told me once that the best solution for poor prices is lots of bushels. Well, if you need lots of bushels, we have to have the right growing environment first, for that seed to be successful. And so, yield monitors are a great tool to maybe either remind you or show you where you're getting your best performance, and those areas where maybe we could do some improvement out here. But please make sure you get them calibrated before you're making your decisions, please.
So I guess as we're wrapping up here, again, you've got a great team that you work with all across the United States. And as you think about, the customers that you've worked with, how do you advise that growers should work with their Stine agronomists to make sure they're making the most of the products that they intend to plant for 2025?
Well, the first step would be to figure out who that person is, and then reach out. So you talk about my team, and yes, I'm excited about the team, and I think we're placed pretty strategically across our sales footprint. We should have performance and training opportunities in just about everybody's backyard. So we have the plots out there, and I have the qualified staff that has been spending most of the summer with doing trainings as well as their data collection that I ask them to do, and really build that confidence level around the products for their area. And it's exciting, and we have such a robust lineup of corn and soybeans that you say, well, gosh, pick out 2 or pick out 3. And I say, yeah, but we've got 4, 5, 6 products in just about every maturity zone that we are seeing just outstanding performance in. And so, grab these products and build your confidence around them. Talk to the agronomists. More than happy to take you out, either walk the fields if the fields are still there, or share the performance after the season is over to help you make your decision on which Stine products you need to put on your farm for next year.
And these 130 data points from the product development plots, I mean, where will they be able to maybe catch some of that information?
Yeah, so what we do is we will summarize this data after the harvest season. It's the 3rd week in November. We all get together and we go into a room and close the door, and we'll walk out the next day, and the agronomists they will have all of the data at their disposal, and then they will spend the next couple months during the winter season through winter trainings out in their areas, sharing this data, sharing our findings as far as not only product performance, but here is our observations throughout the growing season on every one of these products, and why we're excited about this product, or hey, we talked about this product over here. I think this one over here might be a better fit for this area. So they will have all the charts, they'll have all the graphs and all the data to share starting December 1st.
So as we're finishing a 2024 growing season and already with an eye toward 2025, any last words for those growers as they think about where they are today and where they want to go?
So yeah, from my background on the research side, I'll say this: we are still at the tip of the iceberg, as far as I'm concerned, on products and traits. I talked to the group this summer, and there is the potential of a trait for cyst nematode control, and not a seed treatment, not a native trait, but an actual trait that's been developed to show performance against SCN. And as far as I'm concerned, we could see this sort of impact be as important as the very first Roundup trait in soybeans. And I was part of a team that launched Roundup Ready 1 soybeans with a different company, and that really revolutionized the way we looked at soybeans. And we've had some improvements, but we kind of just wallowed around with, just really finding, outstanding products. But as far as a trait goes, there really hasn't been something that has really stood out in the recent past, now that we're at the E3 level. And this trait, which is set to be launched by the end of this decade, which sounds a long ways away, but in research, it's really not, trust me, could really have a huge impact on a $2 billion pest. So that gets me really excited. And Stine is part of this excitement. Stine has been part of the development of this, and it's something that I really look forward to learning more about. So that's incredibly exciting. And I guess with the price fluctuations, farmers may be looking at changing a rotation for next year, and just make sure that we find, and talk to the agronomists, talk to their salespeople, that if they're going to get out of their rotation and they might want to raise more soybeans, well, let's look at those traits that could mostly impact a soybean on soybean acre, typically like a brown stem rot or something like that make sure that we're finding a product that's strong in that environment. Or if you're looking at more of a corn on corn environment, to make sure that we're identifying the traits that will give them the best success out of the Stine bag. So, and just communication. Keep in touch with your Stine rep or your Stine agronomist, and we'll help you along with that decision-making process.
Tom, as always, great to have you here. Thanks for joining us on the podcast and sharing your expertise. We really appreciate everything you do for Stine and the work that you and your team do to support our grower customers.
Thanks, David, and thanks for having me here today.
Well, that's our time for today. I want to thank our guests and our listeners for joining us on another episode of the Stine Seedcast. We'll be back again soon with more expert interviews and insights about all things Stine. If you have a question for our Stine experts, send us an email at asktheseedcast@stineseed.com. That's asktheseedcast@stineseed.com. And to never miss an episode, subscribe to the Stine Seedcast wherever podcasts are found.
Subscribe to the Stine Seedcast wherever podcasts are found. To learn more about Stine and its elite corn and soybean genetics, visit stineseed.com. Stine has yield.